The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Defense Academy's main campus. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different worlds walked between the towering buildings, their various uniforms creating a colorful stream of blue, silver, and gold. Some had 2 legs, others had 4. Some breathed oxygen, others needed special masks. But they all shared the same dream, to become defenders of the galaxy. Cadet Lee Tae-min walked quietly among them, his black hair still messy from sleep. At 19, he looked younger than most of his classmates. His dark eyes rarely met anyone else's, and he preferred to keep to himself. While other cadets talked loudly about their homeworlds or their famous families, Tae-min said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was safer than lies. The military history classroom was located in the Academy's oldest building. The walls were covered with pictures of famous battles and great heroes from across the galaxy. Commander Park, So-jin, stood at the front, her sharp eyes scanning the rows of young faces. She was known throughout the Academy as one of the toughest instructors, someone who never accepted excuses and always demanded excellence. "Today we will study the Battle of Kepler Station," she announced, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. 15 years ago, this battle saved humanity's first colony from complete destruction. It also gave us one of the greatest mysteries in military history. The lights dimmed, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The image that appeared showed a small space station orbiting a blue planet. Around it, dozens of sleek enemy ships moved like hungry sharks. Their hulls were dark red, almost black, with strange symbols carved into their sides. The Vorthon Empire had surrounded Kepler Station with their entire 7th Fleet, Commander Park continued. 200 warships against a small research station. The colonists had no chance. A cadet near the front raised her hand. She was Altarian, with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. "Commander, why didn't Earth send help?" "They tried," Park replied. "But the nearest military fleet was 3 days away. The Vorthons would have destroyed the station in hours." The screen changed to show the interior of a military command center. Humans in uniform sat at control panels, their faces tight with worry. Radio voices crackled through the speakers, reporting the desperate situation. "All fighter pilots are dead or wounded," one voice said. "We have no one left who can fly." "Wait," another voice interrupted. "There's one possibility, but it's insane." Commander Park paused the recording. "What you are about to see changed everything we thought we knew about human capabilities. It also created a legend that has puzzled military experts for 15 years. The screen showed grainy footage from a security camera. A small figure in a pilot's suit walked toward a damaged fighter craft. The image was too blurry to see details, but the person seemed very small, almost childlike. "The pilot's identity was never discovered," Park explained. "The fighter's communication system was damaged, and no one ever claimed responsibility for what happened next." The view switched to external cameras showing the space battle. The damaged fighter launched from the station's docking bay, its engines flickering like dying candles. It looked pathetic compared to the massive Vorthon warships that surrounded it. Then something impossible happened. The small fighter began moving in ways that defied physics. It spun between laser blasts with perfect timing, dove under massive ships with inches to spare, and fired with accuracy that seemed supernatural. Every shot found its target. Every movement was exactly right. The cadets watched in stunned silence as the lone fighter tore through the enemy formation. Vorthon ships exploded one after another, their crews unable to predict or counter the pilots' moves. What should have been a massacre became a one-sided slaughter. Kim Do-hyun, Tae-min's roommate, leaned forward in his seat. His eyes were wide with excitement. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No human can fly like that. The G-forces alone would kill someone." Other cadets nodded in agreement. The Zephyrian cadet behind them clicked his mandibles, a sign of amazement in his species. "Even our best pilots cannot move this way," he said in his buzzing voice. On screen, the mysterious fighter continued its deadly dance. It used the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover, bounced laser beams off asteroid fragments, and somehow always seemed to know exactly where the next attack would come from. The pilot's reflexes were faster than any computer, the tactical decisions more clever than any general. In just 23 minutes, the entire Vorthon fleet was destroyed or fleeing. The small fighter, now badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, limped back to the station. The recording ended with the craft disappearing into the docking bay. The pilot never responded to radio calls, Commander Park said as the lights came back on. When rescue teams reached the fighter, they found it empty. No pilot, no body, no DNA traces. It was as if a ghost had saved Kepler Station. The classroom erupted in discussion. Cadets from a dozen different worlds shared theories about the mysterious pilot. Some thought it was an advanced AI. Others believed it was a new type of human with genetic modifications. A few suggested it might have been an alien spy helping humanity. The official report listed the pilot as unknown, Park continued. But this battle changed how the galaxy sees humanity. Before Kepler Station, most species thought humans were weak and predictable. After seeing this recording, they realized we might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy when properly motivated. In the back row, Tae-min sat perfectly still. While his classmates debated and theorized, his hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breathing had become shallow, and small beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Something about the recording felt familiar. Not just familiar. It felt like watching himself in a mirror. Every movement of the fighter, every tactical decision, every impossible maneuver seemed to echo in his mind like half-remembered dreams. Do-hyun noticed his roommate's strange reaction. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Tae-min forced his hands to relax and tried to smile. "Just tired," he lied. "Didn't sleep well last night." But as Commander Park began explaining the technical aspects of the battle, Tae-min found himself silently correcting her mistakes. She said the pilot had used a deflection shot on the third enemy ship, but Tae-min knew it had been a direct hit to the engine core. She mentioned the fighter had taken 12 hits, but Tae-min remembered. Remembered? It had been 14. These weren't things he should know. The recording was too blurry to show such details, and the official reports had never been released to cadets. Yet somehow, Tae-min knew exactly what had happened in that battle 15 years ago. As the class ended and cadets began filing out, Tae-min remained in his seat. The empty cockpit on the screen seemed to stare back at him, asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. Questions about who he really was, and why watching humanity's greatest mystery felt like looking at his own past. The days following Commander Park's history lesson brought an unusual excitement to the academy. Cadets from every species gathered in small groups, discussing the mysterious pilot from Kepler Station. The recording had been shown many times before, but somehow this viewing had sparked new interest. In the dining hall, conversations buzzed with theories and speculation. The tall Centaurian cadets argued that only their species could handle such extreme G-forces. The insect-like Zephyrians insisted that compound eyes were necessary for such quick reactions. Even the peaceful healers from the Andromeda sector suggested the pilot might have used their meditation techniques to slow down time. Tae-min sat at his usual table in the corner, pushing food around his plate while Do-hyun talked excitedly about the battle. His roommate had spent hours researching everything he could find about the incident. "I found 17 different analysis papers written about that flight pattern," Do-hyun said, waving his tablet in the air. "Nobody can explain how a human survived those maneuvers. The acceleration should have turned his brain into soup." Tae-min nodded without really listening. Since seeing the recording, he had been having strange dreams. Not exactly dreams, more like memories that didn't belong to him. He saw stars wheeling past a cockpit window, felt the vibration of weapons firing, heard the desperate voices of people calling for help. "Are you even paying attention?" Do-hyun asked, noticing his friend's distraction. "Sorry," Tae-min said quickly. "Just thinking about the tactical analysis assignment." It wasn't entirely a lie. Captain Lim Jae-sung had assigned the entire combat tactics class to write a report on the Battle of Kepler Station. Most cadets were struggling with the impossibility of the maneuvers, but Tae-min found himself writing with unusual confidence about flanking patterns and targeting priorities. Later that day, in Dr. Yoon Mi-ra's xenobiology class, the discussion turned to human physical limitations. The professor was explaining why humans shouldn't be able to perform the feats shown in the recording. The human nervous system processes visual information at roughly 50 milliseconds per stimulus. Dr. Yoon said, drawing diagrams on the smartboard. The pilot in the recording was reacting in less than 20 milliseconds. It's medically impossible. A Rigelian cadet raised one of her 4 arms. Could it be genetic modification, Doctor? Unlikely, Dr. Yoon replied. Even our most advanced enhancement procedures can't improve reaction time by that much. The pilot would need a completely different nervous system. Tae-min shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The numbers Dr. Yoon was quoting felt wrong somehow. He wanted to argue but couldn't explain why he disagreed with a respected xenobiology expert. The strange feelings continued during flight simulation training. The Academy's simulator pods were designed to recreate the experience of piloting various spacecraft types. Most cadets found the controls difficult and the physics challenging. Tae-min was different. His hands seemed to know where every control was before his mind caught up. When the instructor called out maneuvers, Tae-min's fighter responded instantly, while his classmates fumbled with unfamiliar systems. During combat scenarios, he found himself anticipating enemy moves and positioning his craft for attacks that hadn't been programmed into the simulation. "Outstanding work, Cadet Lee," said Captain Lim after a particularly complex exercise. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" Tae-min hesitated. The honest answer was that he didn't know. The movements felt natural, like breathing or walking. "I guess I'm just a quick learner, sir." Captain Lim studied him with sharp eyes. "Run the asteroid field scenario, level 7 difficulty." The other cadets gathered around Tae-min's simulator screen. Level 7 was considered impossible for first-year students. The virtual asteroid field was dense and chaotic with obstacles, moving at high speed in unpredictable patterns. Tae-min's hands moved over the controls without conscious thought. His fighter danced between spinning rocks, using micro-corrections that required split-second timing. He found himself following flight paths that seemed suicidal but somehow worked perfectly. The simulation ended with a perfect score. The room was silent. "Remarkable," Captain Lim said quietly. "You flew like you'd been through that field 100 times before." That night, Do-hyun couldn't stop talking about his roommate's performance. "It was incredible, Tae-min. You were pulling moves I've only seen in advanced pilot training videos, and some of those maneuvers looked familiar somehow." Tae-min's blood went cold. "Familiar how?" "I don't know. They reminded me of something, but I can't place it." Do-hyun frowned, thinking hard. Maybe something from a movie or a documentary. But Tae-min noticed his roommate's eyes kept drifting to the tablet where he'd been studying the Kepler station recording. The same recording that had been giving Tae-min nightmares for a week. Commander Park had also noticed Tae-min's unusual abilities. She made discreet inquiries about his background, checking his academy application and admission records. What she found troubled her. Tae-min's early childhood was mostly blank. He had been raised in a government orphanage on Earth, with no records of his parents or his life before age 6. His test scores were excellent, but not exceptional. His psychological profile showed signs of memory gaps and emotional suppression. Most interesting was his medical history. As a young child, Tae-min had undergone several unexplained surgeries. The records were classified above her security clearance. But the dates matched a period when the Earth government had been conducting secret military research. Park began watching Tae-min more carefully during classes. She noticed how he reacted to certain technical details about the Kepler station battle, details that hadn't been included in the public recording. When she mentioned the exact number of enemy ships destroyed, Tae-min nodded as if confirming information he already knew. When she described the fighter's final approach vector, he unconsciously moved his hands as if working controls. Most telling was his reaction to stress. During emergency drills, while other cadets panicked or froze, Tae-min became calm and focused. His voice took on an authority that seemed strange in someone so young. He gave orders like someone who had commanded real battles, not just simulations. One evening, Park found herself reviewing Tae-min's psychological evaluation again. The report mentioned that he sometimes talked in his sleep, muttering numbers that sounded like coordinates. His roommate had reported episodes where Tae-min would wake up screaming about the children and the station. Park cross-referenced the numbers with stellar cartography databases. Her blood ran cold when she realized they were the exact coordinates of Kepler station. The next morning brought disturbing news. Dr. Yoon had been analyzing Tae-min's reflexes during medical examinations. His reaction times were far faster than human normal, not impossible, but highly unusual. More strange were his brain scans, which showed unusual patterns in areas associated with combat decision-making and spatial awareness. It's as if his brain has been trained for warfare, Dr. Yoon explained privately to Commander Park. But that's impossible for someone his age. The neural pathways suggest decades of combat experience. Park stared at Taemin's file, pieces of an impossible puzzle starting to form a pattern. A child with no memory of his early years. Medical procedures he couldn't remember, reflexes too fast for a normal human. Knowledge he shouldn't possess about a 15-year-old battle. And most disturbing of all, the way he flew exactly like the legendary pilot from Kepler Station. As she watched Taemin walk across the academy grounds that evening, Park made a decision. She would begin a full investigation into his background, using every resource at her disposal. Something was very wrong about Cadet Lee Taemin, and she intended to discover what it was. The mystery pilot from Kepler Station had vanished without a trace 15 years ago. But Park was beginning to suspect that the ghost everyone was looking for had been hiding in plain sight all along. The Advanced Combat Simulation Chamber was the largest training facility at the Academy. Its walls could project any environment, deep space, planetary atmospheres, or asteroid fields. Today, Captain Lim had programmed it to recreate historical battles for his final examination. 12 cadets from different species stood in their flight suits, waiting for their assignments. Taemin checked his equipment one more time, trying to ignore the nervous energy buzzing through his body. These simulations counted for 30% of their final grade. Today you will face scenarios based on real battles, Captain Lim announced, his voice echoing in the large chamber. Your performance will determine whether you advance to intermediate flight training. The first 3 teams ran through battles, from the Rigel conflict and the Centauri border wars. They performed well enough, though several cadets made basic tactical errors. Do-Hyun's team managed a close victory against simulated pirates, earning praise from the instructors watching from the observation deck. Team 4, Captain Lim called. Lee Taemin, your squad leader. Your scenario is based on the defense of Kepler Station. Taemin's blood turned to ice. Around him, his 3 teammates, a Zephyrian, an Altarian, and another human, looked excited. The legendary battle was famous throughout the Academy. They had no idea what they were about to face. Sir, Taemin said carefully, perhaps we could try a different scenario. The Kepler Station battle was won by a single pilot. It doesn't really work as a team exercise. Captain Lim's eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my lesson plan, Cadet? No. Sir, I just think the scenario is set. Take your positions. The simulation pods descended from the ceiling, sleek metal capsules that would completely immerse them in the virtual battle. Taemin climbed into his pod with shaking hands. As the systems activated, he found himself in the cockpit of a standard Academy fighter. The view outside showed Kepler Station surrounded by enemy ships. But something was wrong. Instead of the simplified training version of the battle, the simulation was showing the real thing. Every detail was perfect. The exact number of Vorthon vessels, their precise formations, even the damage to the station's hull. This doesn't look like a training simulation, the Altarian cadet said over the comm system. Her voice was tight with worry. She was right. The Academy's training scenarios were always simplified, with fewer enemies and clearer objectives. This looked like someone had recreated the actual battle with perfect accuracy. Control, we have a problem, Taemin called to Captain Lim. The simulation parameters are wrong. Negative, Cadet Lee. Your instruments are showing the correct scenario. Begin your attack run. But Taemin could see what his teammates couldn't. The enemy formation wasn't the training version they had studied. These ships were positioned exactly as they had been 15 years ago, in patterns that made no sense unless you understood the Vorthon battle doctrine that hadn't been discovered. Until years later, the first wave of enemy fire began. Laser blasts filled the space around them, far more intense than any training simulation. The Zephyrian cadet's shields failed immediately, and his fighter began spinning out of control. I'm hit, he screamed. Systems are failing! Do-Hyun's voice crackled over the comm from the observation deck. Something's wrong. The computer is running the actual battle parameters, not the training version. In the control room, technicians scrambled over their consoles. The simulation had somehow accessed classified battle data. and was recreating the real Kepler station engagement. Every enemy ship, every weapon system, every tactical decision was exactly as it had happened. "Shut it down," Captain Lim ordered. "We can't, sir. The system has locked us out. It's running on automatic." Meanwhile, in the simulation, Taemin watched his team being destroyed. The Altarian cadet was trying to help the wounded Zephyrian, but enemy fire was too intense. The other human cadet was panicking, his fighter flying in wild circles as he tried to avoid the laser blasts. This was exactly what had happened 15 years ago. The defenders had been completely outmatched, dying one by one while the station's population waited for rescue that would never come. Except this time, Taemin was here. Something deep in his mind clicked into place. The fear disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. His hands moved over the controls with perfect precision, and suddenly he wasn't Cadet Lee Taemin anymore. He was someone else, someone who had fought this exact battle before. "All units, fall back to defensive positions," he ordered, his voice carrying an authority that made even the panicking cadet obey instantly. "But the mission parameters say we should attack," the Altarian protested. "Forget the mission parameters. I'm taking command." Taemin's fighter shot forward, not toward the enemy formation, but around it. He was using the wreckage of destroyed station equipment as cover, moving in patterns that seemed impossible. His targeting system locked onto enemy vessels and fired with surgical precision. The first Vorthan ship exploded in a ball of flame, then the second, then the third. In the observation deck, the watching cadets and instructors stood in stunned silence. Commander Park gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles were white. On the main display screen, Taemin's fighter was moving exactly like the legendary pilot from the recording. "How is he doing that?" Dr. Yoon whispered. Taemin's tactics were perfect. He wasn't just fighting the battle, he was recreating it move for move. Every attack, every evasion, every impossible maneuver matched the legendary recording. But this time, they could see inside the cockpit. The young cadet's face was calm, focused, like he was doing something he had done 1,000 times before. His hands never hesitated, never fumbled for controls. When enemy fire came at him from 3 directions at once, he somehow found the one escape route that avoided all of them. "Impossible," Captain Lim breathed. "No one flies like that." But Taemin was doing more than flying. He was commanding. His orders to the other cadets were precise and tactical, turning the confused battle into an organized assault. Under his guidance, the Altarian cadet became a skilled support fighter. The human cadet stopped panicking and started following complex attack patterns. Even the wounded Zephyrian was able to contribute, using his damaged fighter as a distraction, while Taemin lined up killing shots. One by one, the Vorthan ships fell. The massive enemy fleet was being systematically destroyed by 4 Academy cadets, led by a 19-year-old who seemed to know exactly what every enemy ship would do before they did it. The battle ended exactly as the legendary recording had ended. The last enemy vessel fled into hyperspace, leaving behind only debris and the battered but victorious defenders. The simulation pods opened, and the 4 cadets climbed out. 3 of them were shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. The 4th, Taemin, looked calm, almost sad. The observation deck was completely silent. 50 cadets and a dozen instructors stared at the young man who had just perfectly recreated the most famous battle in human history. Do Hyun was the first to speak. "Taemin," he said slowly, "how did you know what to do?" Taemin looked up at all the faces watching him. His carefully maintained secret was over. There was no way to explain what had just happened. No innocent reason for his perfect knowledge of a 15-year-old battle. He began, then stopped. The words wouldn't come. Commander Park stepped forward from the observation deck. Her face was pale but determined. "Cadet Lee, report to my office immediately. We need to talk." As Taemin walked toward the exit, he could hear the whispers starting behind him. His teammates, his classmates, even the instructors were all asking the same question. How could a 19-year-old Academy cadet fight exactly like the legendary ghost pilot from Kepler Station? The answer was simple and impossible. But after what they had just witnessed, Taemin knew he couldn't hide the truth any longer. The walk to Commander Park's office felt like the longest journey of Taemin's life. Behind him, he could hear the confused voices of his classmates echoing through the corridors. Word was spreading quickly through the academy about what had happened in the simulation chamber. Commander Park's office was located on the top floor of the administration building. The walls were covered with certificates and photos from her long military career. Through the large window, Taemin could see the academy grounds where cadets were going about their normal activities, unaware that everything was about to change. Park sat behind her desk, studying Taemin with sharp eyes. She had called Admiral Choi, Captain Lim, and Dr. Yoon to join them. The four senior officers created a semicircle of authority that made the small room feel even smaller. "Sit down, Cadet." "Lee," Admiral Choi said quietly. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but his voice carried the weight of absolute command. Taemin took the chair in front of Park's desk. His hands were shaking slightly, so he pressed them against his knees to keep them still. "What we saw today was remarkable," Admiral Choi continued. "You flew like someone with decades of combat experience. Your tactical decisions were perfect. You knew exactly what every enemy ship would do before they did it." "Sir, I can explain." "Can you?" Captain Lim interrupted. "Because I've been flying combat missions for 20 years and I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just win that simulation. You recreated the legendary Battle of Kepler Station move by move." Dr. Yoon leaned forward. "The physiological scans from your simulator pod show impossible readings. Your reaction times were faster than any human I've ever tested. Your brain activity patterns suggest combat experience that should take years to develop." Taemin looked at each of their faces. These people had dedicated their lives to protecting the galaxy. They deserved the truth, even if it would destroy his life. "There's something I need to tell you," he said slowly. "But first you need to promise me something. No matter what I say, please remember that I never wanted to hurt anyone." Admiral Choi nodded. "We're listening." Taemin took a deep breath. 15 years ago, during the Battle of Kepler Station, I was the pilot in that recording. The room went completely silent. Captain Lim's mouth fell open. Dr. Yoon's eyes went wide. Commander Park leaned back in her chair as if she had been hit. "That's impossible," Captain Lim said finally. "You're 19 years old. 15 years ago, you would have been 4. "I was 4 years old," Taemin confirmed. "And I was the pilot who saved Kepler Station." Admiral Choi stood up and walked to the window. For a long moment, he stared out at the academy grounds. When he turned back, his face was pale. "Tell us everything," he said. Taemin's story came out in broken pieces, like fragments of a shattered mirror. He remembered being very young, living in a place that wasn't quite a home and wasn't quite a prison. There were doctors who asked him to play games that weren't really games. There were machines that made his head hurt and needles that made him sleep. "They called it Project Guardian," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Earth government was scared of losing colonies to alien attacks. They thought if they could create super soldiers, humanity would be safe." "Super soldiers," Dr. Yoon repeated, "made from children. Not just any children, orphans, kids with no families who would be missed. They did things to our brains, our nervous systems, made us faster, smarter, gave us knowledge we shouldn't have had." Commander Park's hands were clenched into fists. "How many children were in this program?" 12, originally. By the time of Kepler Station, I was the only one left. Taemin's voice cracked. "The others died during the procedures or the training. Their bodies couldn't handle what they did to us." The room was silent, except for the sound of breathing. These were military officers who had seen war and death, but the idea of experimenting on children was beyond anything they had imagined. "What happened at Kepler Station?" Admiral Choi asked gently. Taemin closed his eyes, remembering. "The station sent out a distress call. All the adult pilots were dead or wounded. The project directors saw it as a test opportunity. They put me in a fighter and launched me at the enemy." "You were 4 years old," Dr. Yoon said, her voice filled with horror. 4 years old, with the tactical knowledge of a military commander and reflexes faster than any adult. I knew ship specifications, weapon systems, enemy tactics. They had put all of that into my brain. Taemin described the battle from his perspective. The terror of being alone in space, surrounded by enemy ships larger than buildings. The strange calm that had settled over him as his training took over, the mechanical precision with which he had destroyed ship after ship. "I wasn't really a person during that battle," he said. "I was a weapon they had built. The child part of me was screaming in terror, but the soldier part was doing what it was programmed to do." "What happened afterward?" Commander Park asked. "The HFY project was shut down immediately. Too many people had seen the recording, and questions were being asked. They couldn't let anyone know they had used a 4-year-old as a weapon. The cover-up had been extensive. All records of Project Guardian were destroyed or classified beyond top secret. The surviving scientists were transferred to distant posts or quietly retired. Taemin himself was placed in a government orphanage with a new identity and his memories suppressed. "For years, I thought I was just a normal kid with good reflexes," he said. "The memory blocks held until I started at the academy. Being around military training, seeing that recording again, it brought everything back." Dr. Yoon was taking notes, her scientific mind working even in the face of such horrible revelations. "The neural modifications must be reasserting themselves as your brain matures. That would explain the improving performance and returning memories." Admiral Choi sat down heavily in his chair. "Do you remember the names of anyone involved in this project?" "Some. Dr. Chang was the chief scientist. General Morrison was the military liaison. Director Hayes ran the facility." Taemin paused. "But, sir, most of them are probably dead now. It was 15 years ago." "Those who aren't dead will face justice," Admiral Choi said grimly. "What was done to you and the other children was a crime against humanity." Captain Lim had been quiet during most of the confession, but now he spoke up. "The official report said the pilot's identity was unknown. Who made that decision?" "Director Hayes. He said it was to protect me, but I think he was really protecting the project. If people knew a 4-year-old had won that battle, they would start asking questions about where a 4-year-old learned to fly." The room fell silent, again as the implications sank in. The legendary pilot of Kepler Station wasn't a hero who had chosen to save the colony. He was a child who had been turned into a weapon and used by adults who should have protected him. "What do you want to do now?" Admiral Choi asked finally. Taemin looked up at him, surprised by the question. "Sir? You're not that 4-year-old weapon anymore, Cadet Lee. You're a 19-year-old man who can make his own choices. What do you want to do with your life?" For the first time in weeks, Taemin smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "I want to be a real pilot, sir. Not a weapon someone built, but a person who chooses to protect others. I want to earn the right to be called a hero." The news of Taemin's revelation spread through the galactic government like wildfire. Within hours of Admiral Choi's report, emergency sessions were called on Earth and dozens of colony worlds. The existence of Project Guardian shocked everyone who learned about it. 3 days after the confession, Do-hyun sat alone in their shared dormitory room. His roommate was in protective custody while investigators decided what to do with him. The room felt empty and strange without Taemin's quiet presence. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Commander Park entered, carrying a data pad and looking tired. "How is he?" Do-hyun asked immediately. "Confused, angry, scared," Park replied honestly. "Imagine learning that your entire childhood was a lie, that you were turned into a weapon before you could even tie your shoes." Do-hyun nodded. He had been thinking about his roommate constantly since the truth came out. All those times, Taemin had seemed distant or troubled suddenly made sense. All those nightmares about coordinates and battles were memories of real events. What's going to happen to him? Park sat down in Taemin's empty chair. "That's complicated. Legally, he's a victim of illegal experimentation, but he's also the most skilled pilot in the galaxy. Some people want to study him. Others want to hide him away. A few idiots actually want to recreate the project that made him. And what does he want? To stay here. To become a real pilot, not a weapon someone built." Park looked at Do-hyun seriously. "He's going to need friends who can see him as a person, not as a legend or a victim." Meanwhile, in a secure conference room on Earth, the investigation into Project Guardian was revealing horrifying details. Most of the original scientists were dead. but their research files had been preserved in classified archives. The torture those 12 children had endured was beyond imagination. Dr. Chang had developed neural modification techniques that rewired developing brains for combat. General Morrison had created training programs that turned 4-year-olds into tactical geniuses. Director Hayes had overseen the entire program, watching children die one by one as their bodies rejected the modifications. 11 children died to create one weapon. Investigator Kim Young-ho told the committee reviewing the files. And when that weapon succeeded too well, they tried to erase him from history. The political implications were massive. Earth's government faced questions about what other illegal programs they had run. Colony worlds demanded investigations into their own military research. Several high-ranking officials resigned in disgrace. But for Tai Min, the larger political storm was less important than the personal one raging inside him. Dr. Yoon had been working with him to understand what had been done to his brain and body. The modifications were permanent but not harmful. He would always be faster and more skilled than normal humans. The question is whether you can live with being different, she explained during one of their sessions. You'll never be a normal person, Tai Min. The neural pathways they created can't be removed. I don't want to be normal, Tai Min replied. I want to be me, the real me, not the weapon they made or the victim people see now. Admiral Choi had been wrestling with an impossible decision. Public opinion was divided about what to do with Tai Min. Some saw him as a hero who had saved Kepler Station. Others saw him as a dangerous experiment that should be controlled. A few extremist groups even called him an abomination that threatened human purity. The decision came down to a simple question. Was Tai Min Lee a person with rights, or a military asset to be managed? Admiral Choi made his choice during a public press conference that was broadcast across the galaxy. Cadet Lee Tai Min is a victim of illegal human experimentation, he announced to the crowd of reporters. He was tortured as a child, used as a weapon, and then abandoned when he was no longer needed. Despite this, he has chosen to use his abilities to protect others. The Admiral paused, looking directly into the cameras. The Galactic Defense Academy will not abandon him as others did. He will continue his training as a cadet, with the same rights and responsibilities as any other student. We judge people by their choices, not by what was done to them. The announcement caused an uproar. Some politicians demanded Tai Min be placed under military control. Others insisted he was too dangerous for normal training. But Admiral Choi had made his decision, and he had the support of the Academy's entire teaching staff. When Tai Min returned to classes a week later, the atmosphere was tense. Some cadets stared at him like he was a celebrity. Others whispered and pointed when they thought he wasn't looking. A few actually seemed afraid of him, but not everyone treated him differently. Do Hyun greeted him normally, complaining about the homework he had missed. The Altarian cadet from his simulation team thanked him for saving her life during the malfunction. Even some of the instructors acted like nothing had changed. You're still the same person, Commander Park told him after his first day back. The only difference is that now everyone knows your story. The real change came gradually. Tai Min stopped trying to hide his abilities. In flight training, he performed at his true level instead of holding back. In tactical studies, he shared insights that came from his unusual experiences. In combat simulations, he took leadership roles and helped train other cadets. He's becoming the person he was meant to be, Dr. Yoon observed during a staff meeting. Not the weapon they created or the victim he thought he was, but someone who chooses to use his gifts responsibly. The legendary recording from Kepler Station was quietly removed from the Academy's teaching materials. It was replaced by live demonstrations from Tai Min himself, who could explain not just what had happened, but why he had made each decision. The important thing to understand, he told a class of first-year cadets, is that being skilled at combat doesn't make you a hero. What makes you a hero is choosing to protect people who can't protect themselves. One young cadet raised her hand. She was human, probably 16 years old, with nervous eyes. But weren't you scared? Fighting all those ships when you were so young? Tai Min considered the question seriously. I was terrified. The child part of me wanted to hide and cry. But I had been given abilities that could save thousands of people. I chose to use those abilities, even though I was scared. Do you regret what happened to you? Another cadet asked. It was a question Min had been asking himself for months. The honest answer was complicated. I regret what they did to the other children. I regret that I never had a normal childhood. But I can't regret saving the people at Kepler Station. He paused, looking around the classroom. What matters isn't what happened to me in the past. What matters is what I choose to do now. 6 months later, Min stood in the Academy's main auditorium wearing the gold uniform of an advanced cadet. He had finished his basic training with honors and was preparing for specialized pilot instruction. Around him, cadets from dozens of species celebrated their own achievements. Du Hyun found him after the ceremony. So, what's next for the famous ghost pilot of Kepler Station? Min smiled. It was a real smile, not the careful expression he had worn for so long. Next, I become the pilot I choose to be. Not a weapon, not a victim, but someone who protects the galaxy because he wants to. Looking around at his fellow cadets, Min felt something he had never experienced before, a sense of belonging. These people knew his story, his abilities, and his past. And they accepted him anyway. He was finally home.